So if we talk about water and its properties, we'll start with the easy one first. Who would like to tell me what it means to be transparent? I'm pretty sure every person filled this one in. Yes, go ahead. Right, so we can see through water. What does that mean? And I'd like to make sure that we make this link. It means that light passes through. And I really want to focus on the word light because that is where I think we'll get the significance to life. Now, a few people were struggling with why would that be significant. Someone said, here's an imaginary scenario, you become invisible so your predator can't see you. And I said, you don't have to be that elaborate. You simply have to think about, do organisms live underwater? The answer is yes, if you were unsure of the answer. Does anyone want to tell me what they put in this section here? Why it might be significant that water is transparent? What was your example? So what would be the significance to their life that they're transparent? You're right, it's true. Some organisms are very, very clear, essentially see-through. Do you know why that might be significant to their life? Why that might help them survive? Okay, so that would definitely be one property. So camouflage could definitely be a reason. Does anyone else have a reason that water being transparent is significant to life? So plants can get light, and I'm even going to use the word photosynthesis because it's the next topic that we'll discuss in this unit after we're done with macromolecules. Plants need light for photosynthesis. Plants live under the water. Not all plants do, but some plants do. And then someone over on this side of the room who was talking about sharks to me. Yeah, that was you guys back there. So you had said sharks would not be able to see and catch things, so we could even just talk about the power of sight. A lot of organisms need to see. They need to see their food source. They need to see danger. Now, sharks are an example of an organism that actually use their nose, their olfactory sense, a little bit more than sight. But the idea of sight would be important. It would be important to a lot of organisms that live underwater that they can see so that they know where they're going, they know where their predators and their prey are. Now the next one, I noticed a lot of people looking this up, and there is nothing wrong with looking things up when you don't know what they mean. When you look things up on especially internet sources, just be cautious of where you're looking. Anybody can post anything on the internet at any time. So if you're looking up what is cohesion and what is adhesion, just make sure that you're getting a reputable source. I was looking for a diagram for a chem test I was making today, and so I did a little Google search, and I found a page where someone had filled in a wiki answer to something, and they were wrong. Like, they put the wrong answer, the wrong explanation. So just be cautious. I'm pretty confident that the definitions I saw were correct. Let's start with cohesion. Does someone want to tell me what cohesion is? Let's see, who's got that one filled in? Alexis, I see something filled in on yours. What did you say for cohesion? So, clinging together, sticking together, being attracted to each other is actually part of the definition of both cohesion and adhesion. And there's one distinct difference, and it's the word that you mentioned afterwards, whether the particles are similar or dissimilar. Cohesion is when the particles are similar. Adhesion is when the particles are dissimilar. In other words, water is attracted to other molecules of water. That's cohesion. Water is also attracted to other types of molecules. If you have taken any chemistry, or you remember probably someone mentioning it briefly one day in Science 10, this is all because of the fact that water is a polar molecule. It has a positive side and a negative side, and because of that, it is attracted to a lot of other substances the way a magnet is attracted to things. So it's attracted to other water molecules because, of course, all of them have a positive and negative side, and it's attracted to other types of molecules as well. So does anyone know why it might be significant to life that water molecules are attracted to each other, or water molecules are attracted to other substances? So we'll talk about transport in plants. And this would be specific to plants because in an organism like us, an animal, there would be some sort of pump. We have a heart that is our pump that is moving things around, but plants don't have that. So plants rely on the fact that water molecules are attracted to other things. In a plant, you have tissue called xylem. It goes from the bottom up, and water is attracted to that xylem tissue, and that helps it move upwards in a plant. The fact that water is attracted to other water molecules means that one water molecule will follow the one in front of it. Does anyone else have any reason that they'd like to mention that cohesion and adhesion might be significant to life? I'll tell you another couple of things that I would always put here. The idea of floating. There are a lot of living organisms that need to be able to float or rest on the surface of the water or move across the surface of the water. And because water has cohesion, it has surface tension, and it makes it so that organisms could stay on the top or on the surface of water rather than on the bottom or rather than sinking. Another thing that I'll mention here are joints. Lots of animals have joints. Joints are the places where two bones connect to each other and you can move. And water is usually the fluid that is protecting your joints from becoming destroyed. Water is present in a lot of places, especially in an animal organism. Joints would be one example where we reduce friction. Now the next point about water is that it is a solvent. Does someone want to tell me what being a solvent means? I saw lots of people with this written down. How about, let's see, Parker, what did you write for what a solvent is? That is an excellent definition. So the liquid in which a solute is dissolved to form a solution. Really wouldn't get much better than that. I'll just make one little side note. Most of the time it's a liquid. It doesn't have to be. So I might replace the word liquid with substance if we want it to be generally correct, but for the most part this is true. It is a liquid, usually water, in which a solute is dissolved to form a solution. I noticed someone writing the word homogeneous mixture, which might be a term that you're familiar with. A solvent is part of a homogeneous mixture. So water is a solvent. Why is it a solvent? The same reason that it has cohesion and adhesion, because it is polar. So the fact that water is polar explains those two sets of properties. Now, does anyone want to tell me what their example was for why water dissolving things might make it important to life? Everyone is very excited to share things. How about you guys at the back over here? Nolan, why don't you tell me what you wrote? So what kind of stuff does water dissolve? Could you think of something that it could dissolve? It might be hard for water to dissolve because a bacteria is a cell, but water would be part of a cell. I see an example here. So are we talking about particles moving in and out of cells? Is that where you were going with osmosis here, or? Okay, so we're talking about in and out of cells. The fact that water moving can take particles in and out of cells, you might remember learning in Science 10, I know this is always my big example, why can't you drink salt water? Salt water causes water to leave your cells rather than go into them, and it actually dehydrates you more. And so water dissolving things, the fact that water could dissolve salt, for example, is an example of how it might be significant to life. Now I'm going to mention a couple of things that water can dissolve. Oxygen can be dissolved in water, and for anything that lives in water, that is a very big deal. An organism could not acquire oxygen if it was not dissolved in water. Now, even for us who are breathing oxygen from the air, it is still significant to our life because we have blood. We also have other fluids. So if you think about human organisms and where water plays a role, your blood is mostly water. And everything that is in your blood is dissolved in the water that your blood is made up of. Urine is stuff dissolved in water. So there are a lot of places in a human organism where things are dissolved in water. So I'll put blood and urine here as an example. Now the last thing about water is its thermal properties. And I'm going to write a term because it's one that I'd want everyone to be familiar with. Water has a very high heat capacity. You might recall doing a calculation, Science 10, where you used this value, 4.19 joules per gram degree Celsius. We're not going to calculate with it. That's not our goal. But what I want to remind you is that water stores heat. It takes a lot of energy for water to change temperature, which means that it can store heat. So are there any examples people would like to share about why this might be helpful to a living organism? Yeah, go ahead. We are made of mostly water, and so it might be important for us personally that water stores heat. So if we think that living organisms are made of water, and it's not just us, it's all living organisms, some less, some more. Some organisms have as much as 99% of their structure as water. For some it's as low as 70%. We're in the 80s as humans. But most of you is made up of water. And so the fact that water stores heat helps you maintain temperature. So I'm going to put the word insulator here. Water helps maintain body temperature. It helps keep your body at the correct temperature so that you can survive. And what we'll see a little bit later on, this week and next, is that temperature is really important for macromolecules to function effectively and properly. The other thing that I'd like to mention in this section is a little bit more of a global idea. The fact that water stores heat helps not just one individual organism, but it helps heat be transferred throughout the globe. Now, this is not the only time that we're going to talk about the properties of water. This will come back when we're talking not just about one single individual organism and how it functions, but when we start talking about ecosystems near the end of the course, we're going to come back to these same properties of water and remind ourselves why it is that water is so important. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask here? So then we are going to talk about two processes. I'm just going to outline what is going on this page, and then I'll give you some time to write. We're going to focus on digestion because it's the next chapter that we're going to do. It's not the only time that these processes happen, but it would be the time you would see it the most often. When things are being digested, we need to break them down. That is where we'll talk about hydrolysis. There are other times when instead of breaking a molecule down, your body or an organism's body needs to put a molecule back together. And that's what dehydration synthesis is. I'll recommend that you hold off trying to copy the diagram so that I can highlight what would be important and what wouldn't be. So let's take a minute and just get the basic definitions. So I'm just going to read through these and see if anyone has any questions about the wording, and then we're going to talk about how we would look at this visually, and that's what the sheet I just passed out to everybody will be for. So the process of digestion involves breaking chemical bonds that hold together one of our three big macromolecules, carbohydrate, proteins, fats. So those are our macromolecules. They're big. We need lots of them. They're the ones we're going to focus on. And this process happens with all of them. And it happens basically the same way with all of them. And what I want to focus on is the similarity. Now the word hydrolysis, if I split it in half, I see hydro and I see lysis. So if I look up the root meaning of that word, it means water cuts. So the process of hydrolysis is where water is cutting apart or breaking apart something. That is literally what the word means. So since we talked about the language of science being its own whole thing, if you know that, hydrolysis sounds fancy, but it's really not very fancy of a word. The idea is that we will add a water molecule. We will add it into the structure of the carbohydrate or the protein or the fat, and that will help split the compound apart. So if we take a look at my little picture here, hydrolysis is the one that's going from the bottom up. And what my picture is illustrating is a rather complicated looking molecule. I do not want you to try to memorize the structure in its entirety of a carbohydrate or a protein or a fat. What I want you to recognize is that water is the key here. What I'm saying is that during hydrolysis, a molecule of water will come and it will insert itself. It will insert itself so that a big molecule could break apart into two smaller pieces. So this water molecule will end up being part of the two smaller molecules. One of the hydrogens will go on one side, the other hydrogen and the oxygen will go on the other side. Now I said I don't want us to focus on the detailed structure of each individual type of compound. You'll notice on the sheet that I passed out to you, I gave you some very, very generic looking structures, and that's because I want us only to focus on the O's and the H's, because that's what water is made out of. Now the opposite process, building a large molecule from two small molecules, involves removing an H and removing an OH group from either a carbohydrate or a protein or a fat, allowing them to join together. That would be the arrow going downwards here. So what's happening on the outside part of the structure is not my concern. I'm just focused on the middle part here, and I'm focused on that hydrogen and the O and the H together, because that's what the molecule of water is made out of. Now this process is called dehydration synthesis. Synthesis means that we're forming something. Dehydration means we are unwatering something. That's where the root of the word comes from. De means you're undoing it. So we are undoing water, taking away water, removing water, and that's allowing us to form a molecule. Now in chemistry terms, this is actually called condensation polymerization, and if you're going to take chem, just keep that word in your brain. You'll use it again someday. If you're not, just pretend I never said it. Just say dehydration synthesis. I'm also mentioning down here the idea of enzymes, because our next probably 4 days of class will be talking about how enzymes work, what enzymes do. We'll do a lab about enzymes. You will be sick of hearing about enzymes. Now, so far, does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask? Questions. The first question asks you, what has to be removed for two monosaccharides to fit together? And hopefully you recognized that if you cut off the OH of one piece and the H of another piece, they would fit together like two puzzle pieces. So the idea would be that that part would fit in there. So by cutting off the OH of one piece and the H of another, they fit together. That is what is happening during dehydration synthesis. I cut off two H's and an O. An O and an H are always together on one side, the H is on the other side. So what has to be removed for two of them to fit together? One molecule of water, H2O. What forms when two are put together? The word is up here. It's a disaccharide because two of them are together. What has to be removed for the third to be added? Another water molecule. So in total, for you to have 3 monosaccharides together, you had to remove 2 molecules of water. What forms when 3 are put together? A polysaccharide. Now I want you to really be aware that I made these generic. I didn't show the internal structure because not all monosaccharides are the same. I focused on the ends because that is the only part of the molecule that we're really going to concentrate on. Now for the other part, the part with glycerol and 3 fatty acids, what I wanted you to recognize was that if you cut, say, the OH group off of all the parts of glycerol, and then you cut the hydrogen off of all of the fatty acids, they would fit together like 3 little puzzle pieces, exactly the same way it happened with carbohydrates. What I want you to recognize is that you had to cut off 3 molecules of water to make 1 lipid, which is different than what we did with the monosaccharides. You only had to cut 1 off each time. But because a triglyceride fat is made up of more subunits, more parts, more molecules of water had to be removed.